Don't get me wrong. I'm not going to come out here and tell you, like, stop using TikTok. That's not fair. And also, I don't think that's realistic. Okay, hi everybody. Thanks for coming back if you've been here before, or hi, welcome if you're new. My name's Mickey. I'm a therapist, and we talk about therapist-y things on this channel. Today, we are talking about ADHD again because the video that I made a little while ago, y'all really enjoyed, and I asked you guys if you want more tips, let me know, and boy did you let me know. So we are talking about more ADHD tips today. To be clear, I said this in the last video, but I'm gonna say it again. This is not all or one-size-fits-all advice. Feel free to take what works and leave the rest. Some of these things might be helpful to you, some of them might not, and that's perfectly okay. It's really important that we honor the nuance that exists in ADHD specifically, but also in neurodivergency generally. We will all need and value and benefit from different things, and that's okay. So these are meant to be broad strokes education and learning and tips and things like that. All of the content that we make on this channel and in this video especially is intended to be broad strokes education and learning, not a replacement for therapy. This is not therapy, hasn't been therapy, never will be therapy. However, if you do need a therapist, there are always links in my description for you to go find one. And I just made a revised video about how to find a therapist and my tips for where to look if you're in the market for one. So I will also put that up here if it's up at the time that I upload this video. So without further ado, let's just get into the list. Actually, just kidding. If you're new here, hi, thanks for coming. You should subscribe. It does really help support me and the work that we're trying to do on this channel, and so it would mean a lot if you stayed. Okay, thanks. Let's get into the list now. I love this little finger thing. It feels so good. Tip number 1. I want to encourage folks to release themselves from the expectation of efficiency. I think this tends to show up most often for folks who experienced criticism and or judgment about their ADHD in childhood, especially in regards to task organization. For those of you who are not aware, it is incredibly common for folks with ADHD or ADD, neurodivergency generally, really, to struggle with task initiation, task paralysis, task organization, all of these things around like the executive functioning required to start a task, transition to a new task, effectively finish a task. This shows up a lot for folks in this area. And because we live in a world that like really values or like prioritizes neurotypical experiences, it can feel very othering, and we oftentimes experience shame in childhood for not being able to be the way that the other fucking kids were. And so this can show up in adulthood where we feel this pressure and this expectation to organize tasks in the most efficient way possible, which for some folks, myself included, can result in task paralysis, where the way that I explain this to my partner is that if I can't, in my mind, visualize and reason through the most efficient way to organize the 17 unrelated things that I need to do, I get stuck and I can't start one, because what if I start a task, but it would have made more sense for that to go in the middle, and then there's other things that I was supposed to do in front of that, and now my tasks are all messed up and they're not as efficient and it's going to waste time, and then I didn't get anything done. Or what if I run out of steam in the middle and then I don't get everything done? So I just won't. But that sucks. That feels really bad. So I want to encourage folks to recognize if this is happening for you. This can also be great work for you to do with a therapist in terms of making the unconscious conscious and like how to recognize that in yourself. Those are all therapy skills. But for the sake of, again, like broad strokes education, notice if this is coming up for you and practice being kind to yourself about it. Because we said this in the last video, but I'm going to repeat it again. Stop trying to force yourself to be neurotypical. That's not fair to you. And it is okay for us to honor that sometimes I'm going to do tasks in a way that's not the most efficient, and that's okay. I may very well run out of steam in the middle of this, and I can ask for help. I can put stuff that's not critical off until another time. I can figure out a different way to accomplish those things. I can figure out a workaround for not getting those things done, and ultimately that I am still worthy of love and belonging and safety and kindness and respect, because my brain just works a little bit differently, and there's nothing wrong with that. So if you find yourself in this place, again, I just want to encourage people to recognize that, notice that, and again, this is great work that you can do with a therapist to figure out what your particular workarounds are. Thing number 2 is going to be an unpopular recommendation, but hear me out, it's important anyways. Limiting our screen time. I know that especially in the age of doom scrolling and social media and like TikTok especially, it's super easy for folks with attention issues to get sucked into the like perpetual scrolling thing. And I want to be clear, I don't say this with judgment, because like I am this person, my therapist is on my back about it. But I want to talk about it because I think it's helpful, like education and awareness about this topic from like psychological perspective of like, what exactly is this doing to my brain? Oftentimes folks with ADHD who are in the like habitual scrolling thing might find themselves feeling like you have a lower and lower tolerance for being stimulated, essentially. And I know that that's like a weird sentence, but when I say stimulation, I mean like mental stimulation and like in like the stimming sense, like having sound or input or sensory input or something. Folks who find themselves, again, like stuck in this sort of habitual scrolling thing might notice that your threshold for discomfort around having less stimulation gets lower and lower, and this can become a problem, especially when we talk about task initiation or feeling understimulated and having like the anxiety and the frustration that comes with that. So don't get me wrong, I'm not going to come out here and tell you like stop using TikTok. That's not fair, and also I don't think that's realistic. However, if you're noticing that this is an issue for you, it can be a thing that we just take stock of and practice setting our screen time limits 30 minutes lower for the day, asking a supportive person or friend to check in with us and say like, hey, how's the screen time thing going? Whatever. Like there's lots of different strategies that we can employ to be aware of this and to practice limiting that from the perspective of self-compassion, from the perspective of wanting to make my brain feel more comfy, from wanting to help myself, like to hook up future me. From that perspective, I very much want to discourage people from doing this work from the self-critical place, because again, that's not fair, it's not helpful, and also it never leads anywhere good. Like behavior modification that's rooted in shame is never fucking helpful to anyone, and it sucks and it feels bad. So really try to resist that urge that we all have to shame ourselves, and practice doing this again from a place of self-compassion. Thing number 3 is to trust what you need. When I say this, we talked a little bit about this in the other video, but I want to talk to you guys about a very relevant piece of research that I found that I think is super important and we should be talking about more. I will link it in the description if you want to see the thing, but for the sake of trying to be succinct, the research that I found could suggest that hyperactivity could serve as a compensatory function for deficits in executive functioning. Meaning that our hyperactivity might be our brain's way of trying to fill the gaps that are left from memory deficits or from short attention spans or task organization deficits. So when we say executive functioning in like the therapy world, this refers to a set of skills that help us function, right? This can look like the task organization, task paralysis thing, but also memory skills and issues and our attention, like stuff like that. There's like a sort of cloud or like umbrella of skills that are all related to that. And we know that folks with ADHD tend to have deficits in those areas. To be clear, I don't love the word deficits, but it is what it is. That's like the language that's used. And so basically what this means is that like folks with ADHD can often have a hard time with not remembering stuff or forgetting things, being very forgetful. We can also have issues with task completion, changing, initiation, those things. And we can also have attention issues. Like this is pretty commonly understood that our attention tends to ping pong. That's all what's referred to as an executive functioning deficit. The thing that I find interesting about this though is that the research suggests that our hyperactivity could be a way for our brain to compensate for those deficits. Meaning if I am like zooming around, right? If I'm like walking around or moving my body while I'm trying to think through something or while I'm trying to remember something, I might have an easier time doing that. I always have to say stuff out loud when I do something that's important for me to remember. Like when I lock my office door at the end of the day, I say out loud, I locked my door, just so that when I get home and I have the panic of like, fuck, did I lock my door? I have that in my brain. It helps me to remember. I don't know why, it just does. This research could suggest that those things are our ADHD or neurodivergent brain's way of filling those gaps, which we talked in the last video about how important it is that we honor the beauty and the nuance and the value of neurodivergent brains. And I think this is that. When we talk about being neurodivergent or having ADHD, it's important that we honor that, not from a place of like, you're not like the neurotypicals and so like that's bad, but from this place of honoring that like your brain is different. It functions in this completely different and new way. And that's not a bad thing, because we can see how, personally, I think it's cool that our brain has developed these other workarounds to create a sense of like ease around functioning and executive functioning skills and things like that. So when I say trust what you need, what I mean is that if it feels important for you to be walking while you complete a task, or to like get your wiggles out and go exercise before you have to sit down to do something that's like pretty heady and like, you know, inside of your brain, if you need to say stuff out loud in order to remember it, or you need colored Post-it notes to remember stuff, whatever, trust that first of all, those things are valid, and second of all, that it's okay for you to do those things, but also to advocate for yourself in relationships, that those things are worthy of respecting, that those things are not an inconvenience or a burden to other people. You are allowed to show up for yourself and to ask the folks who love you to show up for you in the way that you need. Which brings us to thing number 4, is that when you are able, try to hook up future you. What I mean when I say this is that, especially for folks with ADHD, it's not uncommon for us to get into this like hyperfixation, hyperproductivity phase, which, to be clear, can be kind of dangerous if we're neglecting our bodily and personal needs. So be careful with that. But if you're in a phase or time where you're feeling a lot more able to complete tasks, switch tasks, like do practical things, it can be helpful to remember in those moments that there are little things we can do to hook up future us that might make the difference between something getting done and something not getting done or feeling too overwhelming. What I mean when I say this is that, like, for me, for example, when I do a load of laundry, I always empty the lint trap after I'm done, because it sounds silly, and I know especially for neurotypical people it might sound weird that the idea of having to do or like clean the lint trap feels like it's too much. I can't do the laundry, but it's real for me. It's very frustrating to feel like there's 76 little fucking tasks that I have to do before I can finish a thing. And so for me, doing the laundry and emptying the lint trap out when I'm done can sometimes make the difference between me feeling too overwhelmed to do it and me feeling like, okay, all I have to do is just put the shit in there and press the button. I can do this, I can do this, I can do this. So if you're in that place where you're able to hook up future you, practice doing that. If this means having like a backup thing of soap in your house, or making sure that your cleaning supplies are all in the same place, or being strict about your routine. For me, I know that this means like in the morning, if I have something that I need to do, I need to build in the time to do my morning routine in the way that I feel I'm supposed to do it. Because if it gets out of whack, then my whole day is fucked. So I have to do contact lenses, brush my teeth, wash my face in that order, or it's all bad. And so if I am spending time with someone, or again, if I have something to do in the morning, being clear with the folks that I love that like, this is non-negotiable if you want me to function for the rest of the day. That's like what I mean when I say hooking up future me. I'm not sacrificing my stuff or allowing that feeling of shame or fear about advocating for my neurodivergent needs to mean that I'm sort of shitting on like what future me needs in order to feel okay for the rest of the day. So practice doing this if you haven't already. Experiment with it, see how it feels, because sometimes, again, like I said, it can make the difference between us feeling capable or okay to do something and not. The last thing that I want to talk to you about is another thing that might be unpopular, but again, I think it's important to talk about because there's some like interesting research and correlations for us to go over here, which is being mindful of your sleep. I know that especially for ADHD folks, getting good sleep is difficult. So first of all, if you have issues with sleep, sleeping on a regular schedule, falling asleep, waking up, please know that you are not alone in this. There's not some kind of like fatal flaw that's wrong with just you. The diagram of folks who have sleep disorders and folks who are neurodivergent is like inching closer and closer to a circle every day. And it's important for us to acknowledge that because, again, oftentimes in this neurotypical productivity and efficiency focused perspective, we can heap a lot of shame onto folks who have a hard time waking up in the morning, folks who have a hard time going to sleep, and also folks who have a hard time with creating a regular sleep routine. There are a variety of different sleep disorders that neurodivergent folks, particularly ADHD folks, can have. I don't want to list all of them because, to be clear, I'm not an expert in that. And also, I'm sure that I'll miss some, but if you Google it, I'm sure you can find a whole bunch of stuff. But the reason that I bring this up is because, first of all, creating some general support for ourselves around a sleep hygiene routine can be helpful. This might mean winding down, turning your lights off, putting on comfy clothes, limiting our screen time closer to bed, all of those kinds of things. But it might also mean getting a sleep study or talking with a doctor or a medical professional about like, I think I might actually have a sleep disorder. How can you help me? And I know that that's not an accessible resource to everyone. I want to be super clear about that. Healthcare in this country is a fucking travesty. So also be kind to yourself if you can't access that. But generally, I do really want to encourage folks to just be aware that this is happening and that there are a lot of intermediate steps we can take to minimize the harm or minimize the difficulty there. And again, hopefully just provide ourselves with some support, even if that is just validation that it's okay for me to have a hard time with these things. The other thing that's noteworthy about this is that, again, the diagram of folks, or the Venn diagram of folks who have ADHD and who did like the gifted kid thing as teens and adolescents, is a circle basically. And oftentimes, again, from this neurotypical productivity and efficiency focused place, we as a culture really glorify being able to be high achieving, super productive, very successful on no sleep, and that's fucked up. Please stop doing that if you're doing that, first of all. But second of all, I think it's important that we recognize that this is not a flex. Like, being able to function on no sleep, sure, is practically useful sometimes, and it's also a necessity sometimes for extenuating circumstances and whatever, but it is not a thing that we should be glorifying as like a sign of strength. It's not fair or kind or respectful to our bodies, to our brains, to insist that we achieve this same, first of all, made up level of productivity and efficiency that neurotypical folks achieve, but also while having these really debilitating sleep issues. Because again, neurodivergent folks are just going to come to the table with a different set of things, and they're worthy of love and attention and affection and validation and also support. So again, I know that sleep studies and medication and like a CPAP machine or whatever might not be an attainable resource for everyone. That's super valid, but also these are things that we can find some practical support around from loved ones, from a therapist, even again, just in doing the cursory Google search about like, these are the things that I need and how can I do that for myself. So be aware of that. And also just generally, again, please be kind to yourself about it, because regulating our sleep and finding some supportive factors around good sleep can really make a difference in our ability to do all of the other things that we already talked about. So I know that there is a lot in this video. If you guys want more tips about ADHD, let me know. I'm happy to keep making the content, because clearly I have my own struggles with ADHD and like being generally a chaos gremlin. So I'm happy to share whatever learning I found with you guys, and also just to speak about it from a clinical perspective. So if you like the video, subscribe to the channel. We do talk about this, but we also talk about pop culture stuff. So I'd love to have you stay, and then share the video to help the channel grow and to help each other grow. And I will see you guys next Saturday. Okay, bye.